can be used for in later session, and this is the screen that I want to share with you. Okay, there it is. Okay, so I believe that this screen is visible to you. Let me make it bigger. Okay. The only problem is when I make it bigger, for some reasons I can't see this MS Teams. So anyway, so the idea is that I will talk about this subject for around half an hour or 40 minutes, and then if you have any question, you can ask your questions or your doubts later on. Okay, and normally what we follow is the hand raise system. So anyone who has any doubt or query, you can raise your hand, and then I will take your queries one by one. Okay. So let me make it bigger. I hope I am audible and the screen is visible to everyone. So again, good morning, everyone. So here today we are going to talk about the role of culture in development. And as most of you are joining, or I believe all of you are joining the BA Economics program, you might be wondering what we are doing with the culture here. Well, one of the big focus in economics is, and particularly development economics, when we talk about from the perspective of some economic indicators, right? Some of you who have done economics at your +2 level, you might have read few things about economics. At least you have some idea. There's something called GDP. There's something called per capita income. You might have, even if you have not studied economics, you might have heard inflation, prices, and unemployment. These are the terms that we hear or we study in economics. Then why we are focusing on culture in this session? Well, so I will give you a brief idea what is culture and how it is related with other subjects or other indicators in economics. So it will give you this brief idea. Okay? So let me start. So here's one of the definitions of culture. When I'm saying one of the definitions, it's because there are many definitions of culture. And this is one of the definitions that is more commonly used in economic empirical work. Empirical work is when we use some data, do some kind of analysis to understand what kind of behavior is there. So empirical work is a big field in economics. So, and this is one of the definitions that is generally used when we are doing the empirical work in economics. Okay, so what does it say? It says those customary beliefs and values that ethnic, religious, and social groups transmit fairly unchanged from generation to generation. Okay, so the groups can be based on anything. It can be based on your ethnicity. For example, there are some groups, some samaj, like you have some particular caste or religion, and then you have social group as well. For example, this is a group of some particular people, like who are working as a manager in a state bank of India, let's say. This is a group of army officers or some other social group can be defined, and they come together. So, and they have some beliefs and values. What happens is nobody has to say what are the beliefs and values explicitly to each other, but unconsciously they just transmit these values and beliefs to the next generation of people. When we are saying generation, it doesn't have to be the father son, mother son relation. It can be the new members of the club as well. Okay, so when the new people are coming to join this club or society, they accept, and they, by observing, by listening, by different methods, they observe these beliefs and values, and then they get transmitted to the next generation. Okay? So this is one of the definitions that we use in economics for empirical work. So there are different systems in the society, and these are some examples that I have put here on this slide. For example, language. We never consider that language can be an institution in itself. Then language plays many different roles, just not only a method of communication between the individuals. It is far beyond that, and I will discuss about language in little more detail in next few slides. Then there is demography, then the marriage system, there is a family system. So I hope you at least have some idea what these things are. So if we are talking about family system, demography, it talks about how whether you want to have a bigger family, a smaller family, or you are living in a nuclear family. So these are different kinds of systems that you have in a society. Then education as well. What kind of education you want to have, or how much education you want to have. So these are different things. For example, in some societies, the focus is more on technical education. Okay? And in some societies, the focus is on any kind of education, and the technical education comes later on. So, and the marriage, how the marriage happens. Uh, well, it's a very complicated system. Then, in some societies, the marriage happens at an early age. In other societies, marriage happens at a later age. In some societies, we have more divorce. In societies, divorce is discouraged, or obviously there are very few divorces in some societies. Then how do you find your match in the society? All these things uh, are part of marriage system. Let me see if there's any hand raise. Mm, okay, none. So that's good. So I can continue. And okay. So there are many others, but these are some of the common that by now you must have read in your social sciences, humanities, or whatever courses you have done at your +2 level as well. Or just by looking around you, you will have at least some idea what these things are. Okay? Now, as I said, one of the things that I'm going to focus is the language. So I will talk a little bit about language rather than all the systems that I had on the previous slide. So gendered pronoun. When we are speaking language, and particularly if you are Hindi speaking or Punjabi speaking, then or even Urdu speaking, then we don't consciously think about that they are. We learn about pronouns that they are pronouns in our language, but if you have pronoun in your language, or for example, I in my mother tongue, then we never think that there can be language that will not have pronoun. There are some, or in fact, many languages that doesn't have pronoun. They don't differentiate. Uh, you have to use he and she. If there are some Bengali speaking people here, uh, you will understand what I mean. So, they, or in other languages, not only in India, outside India as well, there are many languages. For example, Korean language, they don't have this pronoun. So, but some languages have this pronoun. And basically, when you are using pronoun and any other kind of uh, differentiation in the language, people start to learn it, use it, and it becomes part of their culture. And how it influences, I hope I will be able to discuss some of it later on. Then there is also hierarchy in spoken language as well. For example, in Hindi, when you are talking with your friends or someone who is younger to you will say, um, कहाँ जा रहा है, तू क्या कर रहा है, something like this. But if you're talking to your teachers or some other elders, or you're writing a formal language, formal letters or any emails, then if it is in Hindi, then you will use up, and something similar will happen in many other languages as well. Okay, so if you are writing, let's say, a formal letter, then you can see that there's how you write it. You write, "Hello, sir, how are you?" But when you are writing an SMS or WhatsApp message to your friend, you will say, "Hey, man, how's it going?" or something like that, or maybe even more informal language you're going to use. There, this is the second lines of the translation of the same thing in French. So some languages have this differentiation, and in some languages, this differentiation of hierarchy is not in a formal way. It's um, it's in the context how you are speaking it. So you have to understand from the context that you are speaking to the senior, elder, or you are speaking to the junior or your friend. So languages have different system. Okay. For example, when you have even the occupational title in English, some on the left hand side you see that this is what people used to use or still use in most of the common conversation or even informal letters or communication as well. But on the right hand side, this is something that's what we are trying to use, something that is gender neutral. We are not putting man, woman, or so to differentiate who it is. We are just putting a title, and that can be anyone. It can be a male, it can be a female. So that's how the things are changing, or some people are at least, or some societies are trying to change. Okay. So in 1980s, Ofsted was working as a consultant for IBM, and IBM was a big company. It's still a big company, but not as big as you have other companies that have become like Google, Apple, and other companies. So IBM had the offices in almost every country around the world, and the HR department of IBM wanted to learn about how people who are working in different companies have their expectation, how they behave. So they wanted to learn about their employees. Then after this, design a questionnaire obviously based on the earlier knowledge of from psychology, HR, and things. So, and he sent this questionnaire to thousands of people, around 80,000 or so, in many countries. I think around 30 countries. That's how he started all this work. And then when he got the responses from these people who were working in different countries, then he categorized them, put in all the Excel sheet, and then he could see what how people are expecting or what are the answers of people for different questions in different countries. So after looking at all this data, he came to realize that there are few key differences. That's how you can divide the people living in different world. And he came up with these six cultural dimensions, and these are still used particularly by the HR people, and and to understand the people, okay, when they are working in big organization. It can be a small organization as well. If you are just small, if you want to start a company in a new country or an office in a new country, this is something that will help you to understand how people behave or the whatever they are doing. So it helps to understand. Okay, just give me a second. So you're not able to view the slide. So let me, that's what Kuskar is saying. So let me uh, again share this. So on my side, it's saying is sharing the slides. I hope the slide is visible to you now. Okay. So, well, I think it should be visible. If it is, even if it is not that it's not visible, even then I will be speaking most of the things. So at least you will get an idea what I'm talking about. And if anyone wants, you can write to admission office or Manimala in our school. I can share the slides as well later on if you're not able to view the slides at the moment. Okay. So, for example, the first one is the power distance index. So let me just read all of them and then I will give you definition of a couple of them and then we'll move forward. So one is the power distance index, individualism versus collectivism, masculinity versus femininity, uncertainty avoidance index, long versus short-term orientation, indulgence versus restraint. So these are the 6 dimensions that he came up with. And that's how you can divide the most of the societies in these 6 dimensions. When we are seeing the power distance index, what it basically measure is it tells us how people expect uh, their seniors or their leaders to be. In some societies, they expect that the seniors or their leaders can have more powers, they can have more money, they can have uh, many preferences than the juniors can have in the society. So this is one thing. That then you also have the individualism versus collectivism. What it tells is about that in some societies, individuals or the people who are working for the organization, they think in a very individualistic fashion. That means uh, I want to achieve something, and the the output or the outcome not necessarily be the best for the whole society. So let's say I want to improve or I want to become uh, have promotion or so you are working uh, and your output has to be centric about what is good for you. It doesn't mean you are selfish. Selfish is more negative term where you might be hurting others or you might want to hurt other people consciously. In individualism, that's not the point. The point is that you want growth for yourself rather than for the whole society. If it's good for the society, it's fine. Even if it is not, that's not your concern. So you are looking at yourself as a center of your decision when you are making any decision. Okay? Then one of the other thing is let's say uncertainty avoidance index. In some societies, people are willing to take bigger risk than the other society, and so it can influence how people behave when they are putting their money. Whether you would like to put your money, more money in the stock market or in the bank deposit. So if you are happy to take more uncertainty, more risk, probably in those societies, people are going to put more money in the stock market than in the bank deposit. Okay.
तो फिर ठीक हो गया था। स्माइली पे करा तो वो आगे भागी, पता नहीं स्माइली पे हुआ तो सीधे वो सेकंड पे पहुंच गया। नहीं no, go back, you have to click on smiley. So,
Okay. So the next thing we have talked about culture. So I will just give you an idea how this cultural things can be related with the economic indicators. So I have put 4, but I don't think I have enough time to discuss more. So I will just discuss hopefully gender roles and economic growth. So in development, gender roles are very important. How, what does it mean is how the females in a society being treated or what role they play in economic activities. So one is the female labor force participation. That is how many, as a percentage, how many female are working in a well, when we are saying working, generally that means in the formal or informal, basically the activities that are outside the home. Not we are not talking about the activities that or the work they do at home. So this is one difference. So obviously every female is working, but in many cases they are working at home only or unpaid activities. So when we talk about the female labor force participation, we are talking about the paid activities and generally outside the home. Then there are questions about the sex ratio and all these things, how many female to male ratio we have, and many other things that we talk about in gender roles. Then I hope that I will have time to briefly discuss about economic growth, that's the GDP as well, how this culture can influence the GDP as well. Then this fiscal policy, conflict, many things are related to the culture of a society. Okay. Now, the earlier thoughts were that these gender roles, if we are talking about the gender roles, they are influenced by the economic factors like the level of development, how rich a country is. So the idea was that if you have a rich, prosperous countries, more female will be working over there. Or even if in a family, if the family is rich, then there will be more freedom, and the girls probably can go to higher education, and then they might be working outside the home as well. Then all the family choices, as I said earlier, at what time they get married, and early marriage, late marriage, how many children they will have. So these are the family choices, and earlier thoughts were basically the economic factors influence all these choices. Okay, but the point is, even if you consider all the economic uh, indicators of a family or a society, then we still see that the difference in the, let's say, the female labor force participation, that's the how many female as a percentage working outside the home, cannot be explained just by the per capita income or the education, how educated on average women are in a society. That cannot be explained just by the economic indicators. So the idea came that it is something probably about the culture that's influencing their decision. So if you look at it, we can have just like what we have in the second or the last bullet points. Probably they can shed some light on the economic factors as well. So that what does it mean is, it's not just, let's say, if you're talking the education of women, it's not only that. If, let's say, you can be educated, but in a society, in a particular society, women are discouraged to work as a culture, then even if you are educated, the woman is not going to work. Or if you're talking about family choices, it might not be how many children you can afford in your family. It might be the cultural choices. In some societies and some religion, they uh, they say you can have as many children as you want. So it might be cultural things that is influencing even your economic decisions. So that's how it gets linked together. Okay. So as I said, I will just briefly give you a few examples how it happens. So one of the example important thing is the agriculture technologies and geography and obviously language, as I was discussing in the beginning. Then because most of the societies started as agricultural societies, and in India even today you can safely say around half of the population is still working in agriculture one way or the other. And the hypothesis, one hypothesis that Easter Bosrup uh, put forward, she said that when there is more technology is being used in the agriculture, then uh, it's more beneficial for the men than the women. Because what happens when there's technology, then men captures that technology, they get higher productivity because they are using the better technology now, and then they start using more of it, and men works in the agriculture sector as well if it is using more technology than the women. So that's how uh, that's what happened in most of the society. That was her hypothesis. She did lots of survey in India as well when she came to India in 1960s. Then what she's trying to say is probably will be more clear by these pictures. On the left hand side picture, you see that people are working with some small tools, and this is basically the shifting cultivation where you can just dig the land, a small portion of land, just with the small tools in your probably neighborhood, and have a small agriculture. In that is more favorable to women. But if you see on the right hand side picture, there is a man with two bulls who are pulling the plow. And what happens if you try to consider what it is? It's not only a plow. Plow is a heavy thing. And when you're talking about the plow agriculture, uh, harvest, then what's going to happen is you need muscle power. It's a heavy thing. Not everyone can carry it on their back from home to the field every day, or even if in the field, you can't work with it very easily. And then also you need two bulls, right? And not if it's not bull, it can be any other animal, but generally what you need is a big animal. Cats and dogs are not going to work in this. You need big animals. It can be camel, bulls, or any other big animals. So you need muscle power to control the animals and the plow as well. And if it is happening in a society for generations year after year, then obviously the men start working in the field and the women will be staying at the home and do whatever they are doing at home. Okay, just let me check if there is any query. Mm, no, that's good. Okay, so that's how the culture start developing uh, across the societies. Okay, then obviously, as I said, language is another way or part of culture that transmits the gender norms from one generation to the other generation. Okay. Okay. Here is a map that shows differences across the world on in some parameters. So, as I said, the left on the top left diagram, this is number of genders. So, in this diagram, the darker one, the black color means you have only two genders. So, it's not only in many languages you have just one gender, or you can have more than two genders as well, three genders. In some, there are four genders as well. So, so basically, these four diagrams are for different uh, characteristics of language that we use in grammar. Then the second one on the top right one, this talks about the sex-based differentiation, whether you have only two sex-based gender or less than that or more than that. So that's what it tells in the second one. And then uh, the, the last one, for example, is the gender pronoun that we were discussing earlier. So these are a distribution of different kinds of uh, the tools that are being used in grammar in different languages across the world. So it gives an idea that there is a variation in the way the grammar is being used across the world in different languages, obviously. Now, before I move forward from the gender roles, the other thing is I just want to discuss one more thing, that is about the policy, how a policy can change the gender roles for future generations. So, as some of you might know that how the Australia uh, was used by the Britishers during the colonization period. So when they used to had convicts, one of the things that they found was easier probably for them to ship these convicts to Australia. If you find somebody who is a thief, send a person to Australia, and then they will be working there in large fields in Australia for whatever the period of their conviction is. Okay, so that was the policy. So what they did in this policy, so over hundreds of years, they sent many people or these convicts to Australia. And overwhelmingly, these convicts used to be male. So what happened in the regions where they were sending these convicts? And so what happened, you had more males living in those area in Australia. And in this paper, Pauline and Khattar, or Gaussian, her surname, Khattar, they found that the area where they send more convicts, or basically the male convicts, to Australia, these are the reasons where still there are more gender bias attributes are there in those areas. And their hypothesis is, or their basically results also show that their hypothesis is correct, because in those areas, by policy, you had more males because you were just shipping them to Australia. Since you have more males living there and very few female, males were working and the females were supposed to be at home and do the uh, just rearing the child at home, cooking and all these things. And since even after around 200 years, still those societies are expecting or following those norms that they developed around 200 years back in Australia. Similarly, for example, in China as well, in some area the cotton technology came, they started spinning, weaving, so it has some sort of technology, and generally female are uh, more preferred in textile, particularly cotton textile. So more female were working in those regions. So where this cotton mills came in China earlier, there you will see that females have more autonomy. They work more outside home. So just one policy or one coincidence, historical event can change something, and then over the years it becomes part of culture. That's what we said, beliefs. And so people started believing in something, and then it gets transmitted from one generation to the next generation. Okay? So I think I don't have much time, so I will just briefly also discuss about economic growth as well. So as I talked about individualism earlier and collectivism as well, so I will give you an idea how individualism can uh, affect the economic growth of a society. Mm, okay. Okay. So here is the definition. The individualism score measures the extent to which it is believed that individuals are supposed to take care of themselves as opposed to being strongly integrated and loyal to a cohesive group. Okay, so this is the definition that is being used for individualism. In this diagram that is taken from Alcina and Giuliano's paper, where it shows the level of individualism in different societies. Well, data is basically available for around 90 countries only, 90 or 100 countries only. So the white area basically uh, means there is no data for that particular country. Okay? But if you look at it uh, for the regions where the data is available, you will find that the Europe and North America are the darker region in this diagram. That means these countries have more or higher level of individualism. Okay, and we also know that these are the countries who are generally rich. Mm. Okay. So they try to understand whether individualism can really influence the economic growth. So they took this data on individualism for different countries, and then they did analysis. On the y-axis, it doesn't say what it is, but on the y-axis is the GDP growth. Okay. So as I, I assume that still you have not done any course in on data analysis of any kind, but at least you can understand that there is a positive slope. That means when the individualism is increasing, at the same time, the GDP growth is also increasing. And that is the left-hand side panel or panel A. And in the panel B, it talks about the number of patent or invention per capita that you have. So you see that as the individualism is increasing on the x-axis, on the y-axis, you see that the invention in the society or the number of patents per capita is increasing. The GDP per capita is also increasing. So this is, it gives us an idea at least. There are more methods that will say about the causality and those things you will learn in your course. But at the moment, you can at least just by from this diagram, you can understand that there is a positive relationship between the individualism and the economic growth. So I will just give you one uh, uh, basically idea about these two groups or these two societies, and then I will take your questions. So these were the two groups, Maghribs and I believe it's really called Genoese or Genoese. I don't know how it has to be pronounced, but so these were the two societies, and in Italy and Mediterranean region they were doing trade in 13th century. And so what was happening? The Maghrebs were the non-Muslims who were living there. But because they were living in the close proximity of the Muslims and Jews, they had taken their culture. That means everything has to be done in a group or with a society. So if they have to have a trade in a far off place, they will be doing with somebody they know it. And even if they have to hire somebody, they will hire somebody they trust, they know. So, for example, if you are doing a contract, so what they used to do is you will do this contract in front of everyone in your town or in your village. So everyone know about this, that you have this contract with this person. So it becomes a collective responsibility that everyone has seen what we had decided, and if there will be anything wrong or somebody does wrong, then there will be a collective punishment that throw this person out of the society and all these things. And on the other side, these Genoese, they were Christian, and the idea at that time, 13th century, was that uh, the Christian theology was promoting, particularly the Protestant, that you have to be individual, that you have to think about yourself, you have to work, and that kind of idea. Family was less important, society was obviously less important. So the idea was that okay, you should be able to read and understand your God as well yourself. That's how the Bible become a personal book eventually, rather than somebody reading it for you. So, so people were developing the individualistic culture. So when it came over the years, well, what become one society become the collectivist society, and they didn't had um, written code and rules and law. On the other side, you will have a society that's individualistic, but because you don't have a support or a collective punishment, so you will have to have the legal system, you will have to have individual rights, and so it will be a more formal society as we see today rather than the Maghreb. So that's how we had two different societies, and almost at the same time, around difference of 50, 60 years. And this can be observed in many other societies, and how they do their businesses later on can also be understood from how they have developed their culture in different societies. Okay? So with this little introduction, um, I stop there. And if you have any question, you can ask me now. Well, if you don't have question at the moment, then that's it from my side. And we'll meet next week when you um, start your courses next week. So we'll meet next week then. I'll wait for another couple of minutes. If there are no questions, then we can stop for today.
Hello.
Hello?
Yeah, hello, sir. Can you hear me?
Yes. Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
hello, sir. I'm Hari. I'm from Chennai. I
Okay.
have a question regarding the presentation that you gave right now. So I
Okay.
just wanted to know if modules like this will also be covered during the following semester, and if we are allowed to take electives regarding in such topics and another
Uh,
topic.
Well, as far as I understand, in first year, um, if I'm not wrong, there are no electives in first year. There are electives from second year and more in third year, but not in first year. So in first year, you'll be doing some compulsory courses on maths, statistics, and microeconomics. Of the first semester will be principle of economics, then microeconomics and macroeconomics. So more traditional economic courses. That's what you will be doing in the first 2 semesters. So that is basically to build your foundation in economics, and then you can choose your electives from uh, second or third year.
Okay, sir. Thank you so much.
No problem.
Hello, sir. My name is Kushal. So, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Yes.
So I wanted to ask, so do you think like cultures will, like cultures in different areas will transform, such as in Southern Southeast Asia, to help higher economic growth?
Well, even if uh, what you are saying, even if you know that one culture is uh, can influence in a positive manner the economic growth, the problem is that you can't impose, at least in short run, one culture on another one. Okay. So even if a culture changes, it takes very long time. So that is the problem.
Uh, okay, thank you, sir.
Um, I'm here. Just give me a second. I just need to attend a call, but I'm putting myself on mute. Just give me a. Okay, I'm back. Any other question? So Ankur, should we stop this session for today? Okay, since I don't see there are. So I think there are no more queries at the moment. So Ankur, I think I will uh, leave this session for today, and to the students we'll meet next week again. I think from first. Okay. So thank you very much, and see you next week.